내가 먹고 사는 현장이고 삶의 터전이다 여기가.
저희 어릴 때보다 한 1000배는 많아진 것 같아요.
해삼, 전복은 아예 씨가 말랐고요. 성게조차도 없어지고 있어요.
그럼 저거 내삐면 우리는 죽어요. 우리가 이거 조금씩 먹어야 되는데 이거 우리는 뭐로 먹고 삭히고 그 물로 먹고 자면 나 죽어란 말이야. 나 샤가빠지 고생을 지금까지 왔는데.
Ladies and gentlemen, we resume the second part of the ocean session of 2021 P4G Seoul Summit with a message of Hae-nyo, women divers in Korea. These ladies dive into the ocean like a miracle, even without an oxygen tank, to collect seafood from the ocean floor. Whenever I think about these ladies diving into the ocean, it's always so amazing and impressive. However, when we think about the reality of ocean environment, things are not so impressive. In the name of overcoming the crisis in ocean environment, in the name of achieving the building back bluer through oceans, we have to recognize that we are at a point that we cannot slow down any further. In that regard, the first part of the session focused on zero-emission vessels on coming days. But from now on, we're going to talk about an issue that requires immediate and collective actions, that is marine plastic litter. First, please welcome the first keynote speaker, Mr. Thompson, UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the Oceans. He has made continuous efforts to reinforce cooperation from the international community. Please meet our keynote speaker. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all courtesies observed and greetings to everyone participating in this session on marine plastic litter. You know, I was born and brought up along the coastlines of Fiji, and I'm old enough to remember a world that was basically free of plastic, and it was a very nice one, thank you. I clearly recall the arrival of plastic ballpoint pens and plastic cigarette lighters at my school. They were very unappealing because there was no way to refill the pens with ink or the cigarette lighter with fuel when they ran dry. We were told not to worry because they were designed to be cheap and thrown away. Even to young kids like us, that seemed like a dumb idea at the time. And sure enough, it wasn't long before they and their single-use cousins, plastic bags, plastic straws, plastic bottles, and styrofoam food containers, began littering our drains and our creeks and our beaches. These days, my daily mantra is that we cannot have a healthy planet without a healthy ocean, and that the health of the latter is currently in decline. We know the causes of the decline, anthropogenic greenhouse gases being the main culprit, causing acidification, deoxygenation, and warming, leading to rising sea levels, death of coral, and all the uncertainty of changing marine ecosystems. For reasons of intergenerational justice alone, our harmful fisheries practices, including overfishing, illegal fishing, and ecologically damaging fishing and aquaculture practices, have to be corrected. But it is the other cause of decline which we are addressing today, namely marine plastic pollution. Who can doubt that plastic is an ingenious product that has transformed everything from medicine to food supply systems with its lightweight, waterproof indestructibility? It is now present in everything from our clothing to our transport, from our computers to the homes in which we live. But we've been eating too long on the lotus if we imagine that we can continue our current practices of using and disposing plastic without dire consequence. We currently dump 11 million metric tons of plastic into the ocean each year, and this figure is projected to double by 2030 and nearly triple by 2040. We have unleashed a plastic plague upon the planet. Plastic permeates the ocean, from the Arctic to our Pacific Island beaches, from the depths of the deepest ocean trenches to the great jars that are floating out there mid-ocean in plastic soups. Microplastics have entered the marine food chain, from zooplankton up to the end consumer of seafood, namely Homo sapiens. We're consuming it, and scientists are now finding evidence that nanoplastics are crossing our blood-brain and placental barriers. In his address to the climate COP in Madrid, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said, "We are knowingly destroying the life support systems of this planet." And he followed up on this declaration when, in his State of the Planet address at Columbia University in New York last December, he said, "We have been waging a war against nature, and that the time has come to make peace." Surely, central to these peace talks must be an end to the plague of plastic pollution that we have unleashed upon the ocean. Yes, plastic has brought a myriad of benefits to our ways of life, but at what cost to the planet's health, the ocean's health, and to our own? The landmark report, Breaking the Plastic Wave, published by Systemic and Pew Charitable Trusts in 2019, calculates that plastic flows into the ocean will triple by 2040 under business as usual scenarios, but that immediate action could stem this tide by more than 80%. The report describes how the problem of ocean plastic pollution was created in a lifetime and proposes it can be solved within a generation or sooner. To arrive at the report's proposed solutions, political leaders, policymakers, business executives, and investors will have to shift from incremental to systemic change. Among the report's findings is that even if all current major industry and government commitments to curbing marine pollution were to be met, the world would see a reduction in annual rates of plastic pollution flowing into the ocean of only 7% from the business as usual scenario. Yet the report also shows that if the world were to apply and robustly invest in all the technologies, management practices, and policy approaches currently available to us, including reduction, recycling, and plastic substitution, in 20 years, there would be about an 80% reduction, as I've said, from the current trajectory in the flow of plastic into the ocean. And the new solutions recommended in the report would provide consumers with the same services that plastic delivers today at a lower cost to society. I was also very interested this month to read the Plastic Waste Makers Index, published by Minderoo Foundation in Australia, with its listing of the companies who produce the vast majority of single-use plastic waste globally and the financial institutions who enable them. The Minderoo report presents itself as a tool to assist the companies named to assess their single-use plastic footprint and to measure progress against their own sustainability goals in moving from virgin fossil fuel sources to more circular models. A critical step towards the goal of creating a world without plastic pollution is to bring greater transparency to the plastics supply chain, to better understand its material and financial flows, its environmental impacts, the commitments its companies make to sustainability, and the effectiveness of government policies. The Minderoo report does us all a service in highlighting the reasons the petrochemical industry prefers virgin to recycled polymers. This is a point that needs careful consideration in our struggle to combat the plastic plague. It leads many to conclude that a workable solution would be to introduce a universal levy on the production of virgin polymers. If, in line with the polluter pays principle, governments were to agree unilaterally that such a levy be introduced immediately in all territories, we'd create two solutions right away. Number one, we would have a levy-derived funding for a giant perpetual fund, which would enable financing for developing countries' investment in best practice rubbish collection and disposal. And secondly, we'd have provision of a mechanism to incentivize industry utilization of recyclable polymers over virgin polymers. I suggest that the petrochemical industry would have much to gain from both of these solutions, as would the plastic recycling industry. As we approach UNEA 5, the world's environmental assembly, in Nairobi next February, world attention will be turning increasingly to the appetite expressed by a large number of countries for a global treaty on plastic pollution. The treaty and its implementation cannot come soon enough. On behalf of the ocean, I call for it to be a robust agreement that gets to the root causes of marine plastic pollution and enables a truly recyclable plastics economy. There is a great responsibility upon us all to end our war on nature and face up to the difficult conversations, compromises, decisions, and transformations that lie ahead. Opportunities for synergies and partnerships are many, but we must make haste, for time is not on our side. Change is a constant. Let us ensure it is change for the better. I look forward to hearing all that emerges from today's session, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. He gave a realistically alarming and thought-provoking keynote speech with the theme of assuring a blue future. Ladies and gentlemen, now it is time to invite our second keynote speaker, Mr. Per Brunt, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Environment and Climate of Sweden. The country reminds me of Ms. Greta Thunberg, the Swedish environmental activist. For some reason, when I think about the country, it feels like the people of Sweden will pay more closer attention to the environmental issues and actively participate. Let us meet the Minister Brunt through the screen.
Dear Minister Moon, dear friends of the ocean, I'm honored to speak to you today on the urgent issue of marine plastics. First, let me thank the Republic of Korea for hosting the P4G Seoul summit, this full week of global conversations focusing on action for an inclusive green recovery. With the upcoming COP26 this fall, we are all well aware of the need to step up not only on our climate ambitions, but also on our climate actions. We currently live in a world which is experiencing a pandemic, but there is no time to waste. We need to start building back better, greener and bluer. The SDG 14, Life Below Water, reminds us that there is a blue world under the ocean surface, a world full of life. The amount of plastics in the ocean have severe impact on this life. We hear estimates that there will be more plastic than fish in the sea by 2050. We all have seen the photographs of birds and mammals who have died after eating plastics found in the ocean and animals being entangled by plastics. Reports are also showing that with no changes to current production, consumption or waste management of plastics, plastic pollution in the ocean will triple by 2040. Plastics is harmful to all forms of life in the ocean. Together with ocean warming, plastic pollution is a major threat to our coral reefs. As you are aware, the ocean generates at least half of our planet's oxygen, and a big part of this stems from the coral reefs. It was estimated in 2018 that there were already 11.1 billion plastic items entangled in the corals, items like bottles, diapers, cotton swabs, and food wrappers. And this was only in the Asia-Pacific region. Not only does plastic in the ocean present a risk to our environment, but also our food security and our livelihoods. This is an acute crisis that we, as a global community, need to address in a coordinated manner with global effective responses. In order to build back bluer and create a sustainable consumption and production, we need to rethink how we deal with plastics from beginning to end. We need to address the full life cycle of plastics, and I cannot stress enough the importance of the design phase to respond to the challenges we face with plastics. In areas where possible, we need to remove unnecessary single-use plastic products from the market. The plastics that remains need to be designed to last, to be repaired or recycled into new high-quality products. The need to rethink how we deal with plastics is important for governments, but also for all of us as individuals. For us to be successful, our future does not only depend on innovative solutions, it also depends on our behavior, how we live our day-to-day lives, and what choices we make as global consumers. Some things that I try to think about in my everyday life includes limiting the use of single-use products, such as to-go plastic coffee mugs, and using my own reusable bag when grocery shopping. I'm also keen to sort waste in order to ease high-quality recycling. And I was therefore intrigued to learn about how financial institutions, companies and government institutions in South Korea recently came together in an alliance, Habit Eco Alliance, to reduce plastic waste and encourage a more eco-friendly way of living. Dear friends, the United Nations Environment Assembly has highlighted that there are key gaps in international plastic governance. These shortcomings necessitate a global response that extends beyond waste management to address the entire life cycle of plastic pollution. Therefore, a key priority for my government is to strengthen global governance by deciding upon a global agreement which addresses this urgent challenge. We were very encouraged to see the growing levels of support in favor of a new global agreement at last year's meeting of the UN Ad Hoc Open-Ended Expert Group on Marine Litter and Microplastics. At this point, over 1/3 of the UN member states have publicly called for exploring an agreement. To inform our discussions, the Nordic Minister of Climate and Environment have jointly launched a report on possible elements in a global agreement to prevent plastic pollution. And I hope that this report will be useful in the deliberations to negotiate a global agreement. I understand South Korea has set an ambitious goal to reduce marine plastics littering by 50% by 2030. We invite the Republic of Korea to join this global effort to combat marine plastic litter by supporting a global agreement to prevent plastic pollution. And I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the governments of Ecuador, Germany, Ghana, and Vietnam for bringing us together at the Ministerial Conference on Marine Litter and Plastic Pollution in September. We now have a unique opportunity to secure a clean and thriving ocean. To do so, I believe that we need to decide to start negotiations on a global agreement on plastics at the resumed UNEA 5 next year. Together, we can take action to create a blue ocean without litter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your keynote speech. The two keynote speakers share their vision, goals, and countermeasures to marine litter issues at the national and international level. Now, we're going to move on to a very special event. We're gathered here to promote sustainable development in response to climate change. The special event is the launching of East Asian Sea's initiative on clean oceans. The initiative, supported by the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries of the Republic of Korea and PEMC. PEMC encourages civic groups in ASEAN area to take the lead on marine litter management. There is a Korean civic group called OCEAN. It's an abbreviation of Our Sea of East Asia Network. For more than 10 years, OCEAN has been active for protecting the marine environment and taking the lead, and to establish a cooperative governance with civic groups from Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, and PEMC. We're going to have a MOU ceremony for the launch of East Asia Sea's initiative on clean oceans. Let me introduce the participants of the ceremony. First, those of you who are participating virtually. Ms. Nina Bantulung, Director of Indonesian Waste Platform. She's here with us. And Ms. Unguyen Titutrang, co-founders of Green Hub. And Mr. Zeronimo Reyes, Director of International Coastal Cleanup Philippines. And Ms. Amy Gonzalez, Executive Director of PEMC. PEMC will provide not only financial support, but also insightful ideas for the program. And there are two participants who are actually here with us on site. Mr. Song Sang-gun, Deputy Minister of Marine Policy Office. And we have Ms. Hong Sun-uk, Director of Ocean. It is unfortunate that all participants cannot physically here join us, but as for all P4G events are carried out in a hybrid manner, so the ceremony will take place both online and offline. The ceremony will proceed with a signing by the two participants here. Now we are going to invite Mr. Song Sang-gun, Deputy Minister of Marine Policy Office, and Ms. Hong Sun-uk, Director of Ocean, for the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding. Now the two participants are signing on the MOU. And they will exchange the MOU. Now the two participants are completed their signing. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, as of that, we officially launched East Asian Sea's initiative on clean oceans. Congratulations. Let's give them a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. The East Asian Sea's initiative on clean oceans. I believe that initiative will be a valuable contribution to our cause to reach our goal of carbon neutrality through inclusive green recovery. I'm sure this will consolidate our goal and cooperation. For the launch of this ambitious initiative, Minister Moon Sung-hyuk of Oceans and Fisheries is going to give us an encouraging remarks. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Mr. Peter Thompson, the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Ocean, Mr. Per Bolund, Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Environment of Sweden, Mr. Michael Danaher, Canadian Ambassador to Korea, Mr. Inge Andersen, Executive Director of the UN Environment Program, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good evening from the Republic of Korea. It is my great pleasure and honor to join you in celebrating this significant event. I'd like to start by offering my warmest congratulations to Ms. Amy Gonzalez, the Executive Director of the Partnership in Environmental Management for the Seas of East Asia, which is in brief PEMC, for the successful launch of the East Asian Seas Initiative on Clean Oceans. I would also like to convey my gratitude to non-government organizations, including Green Hub, International Coastal Cleanup Philippines, Indonesian Waste Platform, for your participation and engagement. It is my sincere hope that this initiative will serve as a global best practice for marine litter management led by civil society. My congratulations go to Dr. Sun-Uk Hong, the President of Ocean, and I'd like to count on your leadership in driving the East Asian Seas Initiative on Clean Oceans forward. It would be remiss of me, of course, not to thank all participants here on site as well as online for taking the time to attend the ocean session of the 2021 P4G Summit. Distinguished participants, if we consider that the oceans are global commons, maritime litter issue call for all hands-on-deck efforts of the international community. Therefore, the East Asian Seas Initiative on Clean Oceans warrants great importance as it brings together multiple international players, including Korea, PAMC, and Southeast Asia-based non-government organizations from the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam to share views and ideas and empower civil societies to move forward agendas on marine litter issues in global discourses. Distinguished participants, in the process of confronting the COVID-19 pandemic, a new normal has emerged, changing life as you know it. As containment, quarantine, and face masks have become a way of life, the use of plastic products has surged rapidly. From a different vantage point, however, challenges like these serve as a reminder that we have to carry on with our strong commitment to the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The Korean government takes this commitment very seriously and will take more robust policy actions aimed at reducing marine plastic wastes to prepare for the post-COVID era to come. As a case in point, local and central government agencies, including the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries and the Ministry of Environment, will collaborate to expand the coverage of waste barriers in waterways to stop the inflow of land-based waste into the oceans. The Marine Litter Management Commission, which brings on board all relevant ministries, will be launched so that more comprehensive and harmonized approaches can be taken to eliminate issues regarding marine litter from land-based sources. As another example in the marine litter reduction policy toolbox, Korea will implement a deposit refund system from 2023 to incentivize voluntary retrieval of fishing gears and buoys, and will promote a wider use of biodegradable buoys so they do not end up becoming marine litter and affecting the marine environment. In an effort to bring about a drastic reduction in marine plastic litter, the Adopt a Beach project, which is a public-private partnership initiative, is being undertaken through which private companies and organizations designate a beach and make sure that the adopted beach kept clean. With the maturity of this project, grassroots marine litter management will take hold. The Korean government will also provide support for building cleanup vessels to ensure the thorough retrieval of marine litter around remote islands, and will scale up the marine environment keepers who assist in marine debris collection and monitoring of illegal waste dumping in close cooperation with the fishing communities. Korea is committed to the development of new marine debris management technologies designed to absorb microplastics in the oceans and collect and sort microplastics by different particle sizes. We will work even more closely with PAMC member states, further strengthening our current cooperation in building cleanup boats and enhancing capacity in marine debris management. Distinguished participants, as the ocean have no apparent physical barriers, marine litter can float freely anywhere. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is often referred to as the biggest man-made object in the world, serves as a tragic example. The international community is already considering the marine litter problem as critical an issue as climate change. At the fourth meeting of the ad hoc open-ended expert group on marine litter and microplastics at the UN Environment Programme held in the late 2020, there was broad consensus that international agreement should be explored and a joint global response should be taken. The Korean government supports the establishment of international instruments to address marine litter issues and will play an active role in relevant international discussions. As we move forward, Korea will hold hands even more tightly with the member states of PAMC, P4G, as well as the P4G partnership, to tackle the problem of marine plastic pollution head-on. I sincerely hope that the East Asian Sea Initiative on Clean Oceans lays a firm foundation on which the civil societies can be strongly empowered and capacity can be built for the management of marine debris in the East Asian region. In September 2022, the 7th International Marine Debris Conference will be held in Korea's representative marine city, Busan, in collaboration with the UN Environment Programme. As I have the honor and pleasure of your company here at the P4G Summit Ocean Sessions, I sincerely count on your interest and participation in this upcoming conference as well. Now that we have witnessed the successful launch of the East Asian Seas Initiative on Clean Ocean, I look forward to the smooth sailing of the initiative that moves ahead with the cooperation with the P4G partnership. Korea, for its part, will continue to be on board and lend its support. Distinguished participants, at the Ocean Session, we'll have insightful and interesting presentation and expert panel discussions on marine litter issues. I believe that this session will benefit from your active engagement. And I will also keep my eyes and ears open with keen interest. Thank you very much indeed for your kind attention. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Minister, for your kind words. And now, supporting the statement will be delivered by Executive Director Amy Gonzalez from PEMC. PEMC will take the lead to make an initiative a success and cooperating with the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. She'll join us through online. Please welcome her.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister Moon, Dr. Song, Dr. Hong, distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good evening, good day to all of you. Partnerships in Environmental Management for the Seas of East Asia, or PEMC for short, was created by 11 country partners, including RO Korea and DPRK. Its mission is to foster healthy and resilient coasts and oceans through integrated management solutions and strategic partnerships. PEMC serves as the regional cooperation mechanism to implement the Sustainable Development Strategy for the Seas of East Asia. One of its key programs is on marine pollution reduction and solid waste management. The PEMC Resource Facility, which acts as a partnership secretary, of which I head, is hosted by the Philippine government in Manila. So on behalf of PEMC, I am delighted to join this event and would like to commend the Ministry of Ocean and Fisheries in RO Korea to the leadership of Honorable Minister Moon, our Sea of East Asia Network, or ASEAN, and NGO partners in Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam in developing this joint Clean East Asia Clean Seas Initiative, rather. The goal is to help secure zero plastic seas by 2030 in the East Asian region. As we all know, more than 8 million tons of plastics are dumped into our oceans every year, and 90% of global marine plastic pollution is estimated to come from just 10 rivers. 8 of them are actually in Asia. The global impacts of plastic pollution are highly damaging and can be categorized into environmental, water safety, health, and economic impacts. A recent study found that 73% of deep sea fish contain plastics in their stomach and becomes part of the human food chain. The cost of ocean plastics to tourism, fishing, and shipping industries in APEC countries alone was estimated to be $1.3 billion in 2008 alone. I'm sure this figure has increased now with the global pandemic as well. So the problem is global, it's urgent, and needs constant attention. One local government official in the Philippines actually said that she described the waste problem as on par with peace and order problem in her locality. And I'm sure other local governments share the same feeling. So over the years, PEMC country and non-country partners have been working to develop and implement policies and programs to reduce marine pollution and manage solid waste as part of our programs in the shared regional strategy. PEMC Resource Facility assists countries in implementing solutions that contribute to circular economy and embody humanitarian, socioeconomic, and environmental objectives and targets adopted in national laws and policies, as well as international instruments, such as UN SDG 14.1, the ASEAN Declaration on Marine Litter, and even the Paris Agreement and Aichi biodiversity targets, to name a few. Key to all this is the collaboration and coordination and commitment across countries with government agencies, industry, private sector, informal sector, academe, NGOs, and consumers. This whole of government approach is essential to addressing the crisis of plastics litter to the oceans. No single government or sector can do it on its own. It is also important to view plastics waste management not as a separate or isolated task, but rather an integral and necessary part of an effective solid waste management system. PEMC looks forward to working with the partners of the Clean Seas Initiative to ensure that citizen science contributes to deepening the knowledge on the different plastic waste types leaking into the rivers and oceans, increasing the understanding of plastic waste quantities and key locations for plastic waste leakage into waterways, heightening understanding of their impacts on the economy, health, and environment, so that the results can help civil society advocate and help craft policies and investment programs to reduce marine plastic pollution in the region. So I look forward to working with you all on the next 3 years, and thank you for organizing this event. Good evening.
새가 너무 고통스러워 보였습니다.
플라스틱을 너무 많이 먹는 것 같아서 놀랐어요.
Now we are going to move on to the second partnership presentation that is about the partnership between public and private sector. Ms. Nicole Lvov, the Acting Assistant Administrator from NOAA, will give us a presentation. Please welcome her.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, depending on where you're tuning in from. Thank you to the Republic of Korea's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries for inviting me to join this Green Future special session of the 2021 Partnering for Green Growth and the Global Goals 2030 Summit. My name is Nicole Leboeuf, and I'm the Acting Assistant Administrator of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Ocean Service. I'm pleased to represent NOAA as the U.S. lead federal agency for addressing marine debris issues. Our work at NOAA's National Ocean Service is addressing evolving economic, environmental, and social pressures on our ocean and coasts. We provide decision makers with scientific expertise, real-time observations and predictions, and other authoritative information on the ocean and coastal environment. We translate science into action by building collaborative partnerships at many levels, both within the United States and with our international partners. Addressing the problem of global marine plastic litter is of paramount importance to NOAA. We work on many different aspects of marine debris and are engaged in partnerships with a wide variety of stakeholders also committed to tackling the issue. Within the United States, the NOAA Marine Debris Program serves as our government's lead on marine debris or marine litter issues. The NOAA Marine Debris Program was created by the U.S. Congress in 2006 out of the growing recognition of the sheer amount and the serious impact of marine debris in U.S. waters. Since that time, and particularly in the last few years, this issue has gained prominence on the international stage and is rightfully getting much attention from the focus of the global community. The marine debris issue is not only a national problem for the United States, it's a global problem that will affect every coastal nation. At NOAA, and more broadly across the U.S. government, we are committed to working with the international community on this important issue. This special session is evidence that the international community is continuing to work closely together to stop marine plastic pollution. I greatly value the opportunities to engage, such as today, with colleagues from across the globe, especially on a topic so important to all of us that deeply care about the state of our ocean. At NOAA, we understand that prevention is the ultimate solution to marine debris. NOAA's Marine Debris Program stresses the importance of preventing marine debris from ever entering the environment in the first place. NOAA does this by funding prevention projects that work with public, businesses, and other relevant stakeholders to raise awareness of the issue and to create lasting changes in behavior that reduce marine debris. We also produce educational materials to be used by school teachers and to raise the visibility of this issue with children of all ages. It's important to reach the youngest generations so that they form good habits and so that they understand early in life that this problem is one that can be solved. To address the marine debris that's already in the environment, our Marine Debris Program funds community-based marine debris removal projects. From local shoreline cleanups to vessel removals, these projects benefit coastal habitats, waterways, and wildlife in the United States. Since 2006, NOAA has supported over 160 marine debris removal projects and removed more than 22,500 metric tons of marine debris from U.S. coastal and marine environment. These projects have both a direct and indirect benefit and more long-lasting benefits as they also help raise public awareness. Marine debris is a growing problem, one that is ready for action now. Part of this action is to better understand where marine debris comes from, how it moves through the marine environment, and where it ultimately ends up. That's why another element of NOAA's Marine Debris Program is focused on research to better understand this issue and its impacts. Our program funds research projects with partners in academia, U.S. state and other national government agencies, and with non-governmental organizations. Our current marine debris research priorities include funding projects that focus on the impact of marine debris to commercial seafood species, whether exposure to plastics and chemicals harm wildlife, and how marine debris is transported and where it ends up, and the economic impacts of marine debris. Last year, NOAA began working with the U.S. National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to convene a group of experts to undertake a study to understand the United States' contribution to global ocean plastic waste. The U.S. National Academies is a prestigious organization designed to provide objective, independent advice to inform U.S. policy and to benefit society. They have a trusted history of sharing evidence-based information on complex issues. The Academy's Global Oceans Plastic Study will evaluate the United States' contributions to the global ocean plastic waste, including types, sources, and geographic variations. From a global trade perspective, the study will examine the import and export of plastic waste to and from the United States, including the destinations of the exported plastic and the waste management infrastructure and environmental conditions of these locations. To help us better understand the problem in the future, the study will also assess the potential value of a national marine debris tracking and monitoring system and how such a system might be designed and implemented. Finally, perhaps most importantly, The study will recommend potential means to reduce the United States' contribution to global ocean plastic waste. The United States acknowledges our role in the global marine debris problem, and we are committed to working with our international partners to reduce the occurrence and impacts of plastics in the marine environment. We look forward to sharing the results of this important study with the global community as soon as they are available. Creating and fostering international partnerships to address marine debris is essential as we work together to effectively resolve the issue. The United States federal agencies are looking for new ways of engaging other governments to address marine debris. For example, our government passed legislation in 2018 that directs our U.S. trade representatives to include the topic of addressing solid waste pollution to the marine environment in any new trade agreement signed by the United States. We saw this implemented when the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement was entered into force in July of 2020. This particular trilateral agreement also includes significant provisions in environmental work to promote collaboration on marine debris issues. More recent legislation passed just last December in the United States went one step further to facilitate international partnerships and directing the United States government to include marine debris issues in any relevant international agreement. Clearly, here at NOAA and throughout the U.S. government, we believe that international cooperation and partnerships are key to solving this issue. We provide policy and technical advice to other U.S. government agencies relative to their international engagements in key fora, such as the G7, the G20, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, the UN Environment Program, and many others. Korea has been a key ally in many of these efforts. In these matters, we have had a close and fruitful relationship with the government of the Republic of Korea. In 2021, NOAA and Korea's Ministry of Ocean and Fisheries are celebrating 20 years of collaboration via our joint project agreement, which focuses on science and technology cooperation for integrated coastal and ocean resource management. This long-standing partnership is a great example of the benefits of collaborative activities where the project output is clearly larger than the sum of its parts. One of our current projects through this agreement is helping Korea plan the 7th International Marine Debris Conference, or the 7IMDC. We're very excited that this will be the first IMDC to take place outside of the United States with another government as a host. I want to take this opportunity to thank the government of the Republic of Korea and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries for hosting this important event. NOAA looks forward to working with you and the UN Environment Program, who will be a co-host for the 7IMDC as we plan this important conference. In closing, I would like to thank you all again for the opportunity to provide remarks on how NOAA and the U.S. government are working on the issue of marine debris, including marine plastic litter. We truly value working through partnerships, as we realize that no one agency, government, or international organization can do this job on its own. The vision of NOAA's Marine Debris Program is that our global ocean and coastlines around the world are free from the impacts of marine debris. We look forward to working with all of you on this vision and making it a reality. Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to the panel discussion with the theme of marine plastic litter. 6 experts are joined here via online and offline. Ms. Inger Andersen, the Executive Director of UNEP, Dr. Hong Sang-hee, Principal Research Scientist from Korea Institute of Ocean and Science and Technology, Mr. Hans Axel Christensen, CEO of Plastics, Mr. Marco Lambertini, Director General of WWF International, Mr. Michael Denaher, Canadian Ambassador to Korea. He's actually here with us on site. And Dr. Shim Won-jun will serve as a moderator from Korea Institute of Ocean and Science and Technology. We look forward to the lively and productive discussion on marine plastic issue. Dr. Shim, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Won-jun Shim. I'm very happy to moderate this session with such a distinguished panel of experts. This panel will analyze the marine plastic litter problem in each sector and discuss ways to address them. Korea is the world's biggest consumer of fisheries products. Actually, I had seafood 간장게장 for my dinner today, but unfortunately last month, a half-a-liter plastic water bottle was found in the stomach of an anglerfish in the Korean market. Everybody was very shocked with the news. This case shows how close to us the marine plastic litter problem. There are actually lots of issues to be discussed regarding marine plastic pollution, though. Today we will focus on 3 subtopics. Firstly, the paradigm shift in marine plastic management. Secondly, public-private cooperation and the reduction in the management capacity gap across countries. And the last, a post-plastic society and microplastic. Here's how I moderate the panel discussion. I will call on each panelist and ask a question on each topic. And after the panelists answer my question, all the subtopics, and we will have a separate the Q&A session. During the Q&A session, a panelist may ask a question to other panelists, or I'm going to pick some question raised by audience from the chat box and ask those questions to one of the panelists. Is everything clear? Okay, let's get started. I'd like to invite the panelists to speak on the first topic, the paradigm shift in marine plastic management. The first question goes to Mrs. Inga Andersen, Executive Director in UNEP. The question is, marine plastic pollution have become a global issue and a regular agenda at various UN agencies. Implementation of international convention is being discussed in mainly United Nations Environmental Assembly. Could you please share with us the current progress and any opinion about international convention?
Well, yeah, and thank you very much for doing this and for the focus on this critical issue. Look, at this point, it's too soon to speak about a new agreement, but what we can say is that the cost of inaction far exceeds the cost of action, and that action is urgent, right? We know that billions of dollars are lost from the economy because of pollution in the marine systems. On UNEP's side, we were proud to see our member states at the United Nations Environment Assembly in 2019 pass a resolution that decided that really what we need to do before we jump into we need a convention, we need a treaty, actually we need to understand from experts what's going on, what are the issues, what are the push and pull factors, and how can we potentially address them. And so an open-ended expert group that was member states based has worked for a significant period of time and have come up with potential responses. And yes, one potential response to be further discussed is some sort of legally binding mechanism. But another potential response is to strengthen existing instruments that already exist at the international level. Remember, for example, that the Basel Convention has a plastics amendment. I can go into that in greater detail. And another dimension that they discussed was to strengthen the coordination and knowledge sharing through existing mechanism, again, the Regional Seas Convention. So important that we don't jump too far ahead. Now, the stock-taking exercise that this ad hoc expert group undertook agreed to do better agreed that it was needed to do better harmonization of approaches and much more action understanding on the life cycle of plastics, better access to innovative public and private financing. These were the kind of issues. Now, the point that I want to leave everyone with here is not having a global agreement is not an excuse for inaction, right? We need action with or without a global agreement because what we're doing now is simply not acceptable. So regardless of whatever instrument we agree on, We have to have some global measures that are based on science, that connect with regional and national and local action, as well as global actions that have already been agreed. And whatever we build in terms of global actions, it has to synergize with other multilateral environmental agreements, such as what I mentioned, the chemical and waste conventions and the regional seas, and of course, the biodiversity and the climate change conventions, let's not forget. But we also need to think about, of course, that we really have an opportunity to reduce and to avoid unnecessary and problematic plastic uses and really prioritize circularity and for high leakage plastic categories. And that's something we haven't tackled yet. Governments can set the guardrails right now on some of these dimensions. They don't need to wait for a global agreement. Governments can set the guardrails for plastic content, for the kind of plastics, for recycling, and for reduction. And I think that these are critical issues. Let me stop here.
Okay, there. I'd like to ask the second question to Mr. Marco Lambertini, the Director General of WWF International. Considering the whole life cycle of a plastic product, the upstream measures seem somewhat insufficient compared to downstream measures. So what do you think with the opinion that upstream measures need to be strengthened at the product stage?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And again, thank you also for inviting me to this very important event. And the plastic as a product, as a material, as a very complex life cycle and value chain. And so there is not a silver bullet to resolve the issue of plastic pollution. So I want to stress at the beginning that we've got to embrace a plan which is multifaceted, which is particularly around 4 key streams, if you like. One is reduction of unnecessary plastic, for sure. The second one is greater and better collection and waste management. Invest in recycling and circularity. And of course, last but not least, also invest in innovation to identify alternatives, biodegradable, sustainable alternative polymers. But ultimately, unless we address the upstream challenges by changing product design, logistic systems, broader consumption patterns, very important, we will never solve the plastic pollution problem. Downstream solutions are critical as part of the mix of the solutions, but continue to focus on the symptoms of the problem rather than the underlying cause. And so the plastic value chain is structurally linear. Let's remember there is also a limit, for example, to how many times plastic can be recycled. And so therefore is by definition largely unsustainable. And effective interventions require us to think the broader system and how to create a truly circular and sustainable approach using more sustainable alternatives to oil-based polymers. And so to your question, effectively, we need to adopt a mix of approaches, but upstream challenges and upstream solutions are the ones that we probably need to focus as strongly, if not more strongly, than the downstream ones.
Okay, thank you. So, third question to Mr. Michael Denner, Canadian Ambassador to Korea. He's on site. So, developing national action plan, including the legislative measures, could work as the basic framework that grounds countermeasures of marine plastic litter. For this, I believe that a system improvement such as legislative measures, national action plans, and establishment of the incentives is needed at the national level. What do you think about this?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, and thank you for the invitation, of course. And I'm very happy to represent Canada. We're the country with the world's longest coastline, but we don't always think of ourselves as a maritime nation. And of course, many parts of our country do. In particular, I think of Eastern Canada, which was affected by the cod fishery collapse in the 1990s, which was devastating in terms of the economic and biological health of that region. And that's an important part of my answer, if you allow me, because Canada being a federal country, it's important that we have an integrated solution which reflects all stakeholders, so not just our federal governments, but our subnational, and in the case of our indigenous communities, the individual communities across Canada that they represent. The focus of our approach has really been on legislation and an action plan which is developed in a strategic way with industry. It's important to have industry involved in a circular economy approach and providing them with incentives, with policy frameworks. We do have a goal of zero plastic waste by 2030, and we will be working with other countries, in particular through the Oceans Plastic Charter, which Canada had championed at the G7 summit in 2019. And Canada's already begun with some legislation to prohibit the manufacture, import, and sale of plastic microbeads in toiletries. A ban will be forthcoming on other consumable products which are found in the environment, which have available alternatives such as checkout bags, straws, stir sticks, ring beverage, etc. But we've already seen private sector, I'll give the example of Starbucks, not a Canadian firm of course, but they're very much present in Canada, and they have gone well beyond existing standards in eliminating plastic waste in their premises. So again, I think there are a number of different things that an individual country can do, but it's going to have to be in concert with a number of stakeholders, and industry in particular is going to be important.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing good practices done in Canada. I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Hans Axel Christensen, the CEO of Plastics. So I know that you are recycling post-consumer marine fiber waste, maritime fiber waste, such as the fishing nets and ropes into new raw material, which is used again in the wide variety of products, including even new ropes for the maritime industry. This type of circular economic approach is actively being discussed as a way to respond to the plastic problem. What is your opinion on this? Hans?
First of all, thank you very much for the question. And thank you also very much for inviting me to participate in this extremely important panel discussion with such esteemed panelists. You know, I feel it is extremely important to emphasize that the actual problem the world is facing is not, you can say as such in relative term, plastic, the material in itself. It is in fact when we allow plastic to become waste, allowing plastic to seep into our seas and oceans, our environment, or losing it to landfill. It becomes a problem when we don't recognize end-of-life plastic products and packaging as the resource they actually represent, to be used again and again and again. Why? Because, you know, done rightly, plastics is in fact a circular material. Well, being a recycler, we coin ourselves a manufacturer of green plastics. Circular economy is at the heart of plastics. We believe that to solve the plastic waste problem, the whole value chain, as has been said today, also must join in, from brand owners, plastic converters and designers, as well to consumers and recyclers. It is not enough to just intercept waste, we must prevent it. To us, this means that products must be designed modularly for disassembly. Products must be designed for recyclability. We must ensure to capture the end-of-life plastic products, ensuring the best practice infrastructure and collection systems. And lastly, but not the least, to actually remember to include recycled material in all products. Why? Because to stimulate and accelerate the circular economy, the circular material loops, it is imperative that we also use the recycled material that we produce.
So use again and again. Okay, good. I'd like to ask a question to Dr. Sang-Hong. Sir, in order to solve the marine plastic debris problem, I think it is necessary to persuade various groups of stakeholders. Thus, it is why the provision of a sound scientific information is important to have the stakeholders understood and accept new policies. So would you give a good example or practice about this for us?
At first, I would like to thanks to inviting me these important activities and also giving me good questions. Actually, the scientific information play an important role in the communicating different opinions and make a consensus among stakeholders. We can find a good example in the issue of the expanded polystyrene and aquaculture buoy, shortly EPS buoy or styrofoam buoy in South Korea. EPS buoy is the most common item of the beach debris in South Korea for a long time. About 2 million EPS buoys are deployed each year, and among which only 28% of them are retrieved for recovery, and the large portions are discarded to the environment during their use or after disposal. Although this EPS marine debris pollute seriously Korean coasts for a long time, government could not regulate the EPS buoy because of strong resistance of the aquaculture sector. But recently, based on the recent scientific findings by Korean scientists, such as high prevalence of the EPS microplastics along the Korean coasts and their rapid fragmentation potentials, and also the hazardous additives inside the EPS. Governments finally decide to ultimate ban of the EPS buoy by 2025. This is a very important scientific evidence because this scientific evidence has been used to persuade the stakeholders, including the fishermen and the buoy manufacturer, publics, and also government officer. This is a very good example how scientific findings contribute to government policy making process.
Yeah, thank you for a very good example. I'd like to go back to the Mrs. Ingo Anderson again. The marine plastic litter are regarded as long-range transport pollutants, we call transboundary pollutant. So when it is not properly managed at the sources, it affects the jurisdiction of other countries, and as we know, it is accumulated in convergence zones on open oceans. What are the countermeasures for these transboundary pollutants, especially accumulated in the high seas?
Well, I mean, it's a transboundary pollutant, so therefore it's a transboundary challenge. Therefore, it's an international and multilateral solution that needs all hands on deck, so to speak. And I think while we appreciate government and industry commitments so far, we also know that that commitment is only likely to reduce by around 7% by 2040. The cumulative, the accumulation in our seas. So it's a fundamental shift that we need to see. And the United Nations Environment Assembly, Part 2, which will take place early next year, it had to be divided because of the COVID situation. We view that to plastics and to marine litter as to what Durban was to climate. It is a big chance to make some commitments because we need to, as we heard from the other speakers, really address plastics through truly understanding the story here. It originates from wasteful and linear consumption and production, right? And so we need to be very mindful that there are many other externalities beyond just what happens in the sea. There is the GHG emissions from the production, and there is the impact that this on the energy that we use from this make, take, and dispose model that we are living with. So we really need to think differently. And so hoping and looking towards the private sector, they need to integrate circularity into the core of the business strategies, and set targets and reorient loans, etc. But more importantly, frankly, is what governments do. Governments need to develop and strengthen the policy and the regulatory frameworks. That guardrail around generation, around collection, around separation, reuse, etc., and final disposal, that's what is needed. We need to also, as we heard Marco Lambertini say, phase out certain plastics, and we need to reduce our overall consumption, obviously. And then we need to think about the kind of economic instruments that we have in place. Right now, do we have polluter pays principles? Right now, are we taxing properly that waste? So are we paying full price on the plastics that we buy when we buy whatever we buy that is wrapped in plastics? And we need to think about how can we subsidize the right thing and not the wrong thing? What kind of tax breaks can we use so that reduction is happening, so that different packaging is happening? That's the kind of way that we can shift. So something for private sector, something for governments, and finally, individuals, you and me. We vote with our votes, and we vote with our forks and knives, and we vote with our wallets. And so we need them with our dollar bills or euros or whatever we are spending. So we need to also, as consumers, be very much aware of our own footprint. So I think it's not just about the transboundary nature of this. It really is about the government. It is about private sector. It is about individuals, and it is a fundamental rethink.
Okay, yeah, definitely there are more opinions to add to this, but two other topics waiting for us, so we'd better move to the next topic. The topic for the second segment is the public and private cooperation and the reduction in the management practice gap or capacity gap across countries. I'd like to the first question to the Michael Denner, Canadian Ambassador to Korea. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for marine litter, everybody knows. The coordination or cooperation among various stakeholders is a key to solve the problem. So how can a government and industry work together to tackle these issues?
Well, thank you for the question. And I mentioned in the previous answer when I spoke on national strategies, the centrality of industry, particularly as a vector of innovation and response. And I take at heart the comments of Madame Anderson in terms of the whole of society approach. But I think from a Canadian perspective, we're looking to work with industry in many different ways. We have a lot of experience on a number of different areas working between government and industry. All countries do. And I think it means that sometimes solutions have to be tailored to the specific needs of sectors and of business size. So just as an example, in Canada, we've invested in small and medium-sized business to develop solutions to specific plastic challenges which are facing them in their industry. And I think we recognize that the capacity of SME to innovate is great, but the resources may be very limited. That's just one example. One other thing that we've approached is to have a National Canada Plastics Pact, which is essentially involving business, policymakers, associations, NGOs across the national plastic value chain. And they have focused in particular sectors again, such as agriculture, textile, fishing, where plastics are a particular concern and issue. And they have led to innovation, and I have one example in PPE-specific recycling technologies where the government and research has supported the healthcare sector in developing hospital protocols that target sustainable procurement, sterilization, reuse, and recycling of PPE waste. And of course, that's a very important issue in this COVID era. Another initiative has been the WEF's Forum on Global Plastic Action Partnerships, and Canada is a co-chair on that, the steering board. And this is a vehicle to help emerging economies develop their own national strategies and give them some guidance and formation and dealing with strategies with involving industry at a national level in some of the critical economies. And the partnership has in fact helped to create transition to a circular plastics economy in several Southeast Asian states, notably Indonesia and Vietnam, as well as Ghana, Nigeria, and Africa. So I'm here to speak on behalf of whole of government, and I think this is what it's going to take. It's going to be looking at policies that affect all areas, not just national industrial policy, but official development assistance as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Marco Lambertini. The active participation of industries and civil societies is definitely required to tackle marine litter issues. The various measures are being taken at national or regional level, such as adaptability campaign or citizen science project and voluntary plastic reduction programs by industry. But what are other ways to promote the private sector participation?
Well, thank you. That's another really key question. And let me just go back to what I said at the beginning. The plastic pollution issue, it is a complex issue and a global issue as well, as Inger put very clearly. And it does require, therefore, a strongly coordinated effort that brings together everyone, businesses, investors, civil society, and of course, government, but also all of us as consumers. And for this to actually happen, we need, first of all, a common direction, a common goal and a common plan that we all subscribe to and we all can contribute to. This is why we are delighted that a number of companies, in fact, I think the number is about 50 of the large global companies in this space, joined also in already a pretty large group of civil society organizations and over now 80 countries, I think, calling for a new agreement on plastic pollution. Now, I actually agree with Inger when she said, whether it is a brand new agreement or whether an element of an existing agreement, that doesn't really matter. We need to look into that. But what is important that we have a common shared agreement with a clear destination and a clear set of targets. There is a business case and as well an environmental case for a clear and robust global regulatory framework from a business perspective, particularly in order to create a level playing field towards which businesses can engage and contribute. And business can be a champion for and an advocate for ambitious policy change. We know that governments are incentivized and motivated and gain confidence from business support towards policy change. So that's the first important contribution business can do, support a global agreement, a global goal on plastic, global plan on plastic. We have a similar global plan for climate. We are going to have a similar clear global plan on biodiversity later this year. These are other big global challenges. The plastic pollution is serious enough to deserve a global plan and as well. But let me be clear, again, as Inger just mentioned, let's not wait for a global plan to take action. And that's, the companies do not have to wait for a global agreement to take action. And first of all, the first step in a company serious about plastic pollution is to audit their own plastic footprint. Take a look at the issues that they're having, the impact, the footprint they're having, and develop a plan that addresses those issues. There are some interesting initiatives. One is the WWF initiative, it's called Resource Plastic Footprint, but there are others as well around national plastic pacts. We heard from the Canadian ambassador as well, New Plastic Economy, global commitments. There are many initiatives that actually support companies to transparently assess their plastic footprint and address it decisively. And as I said earlier, by having a clear plan agreed by the world, government and businesses and investors, will actually make this job much easier and accelerate action as well.
Okay, thank you. So If you guys don't mind, I'd like to call each panelist on first name term. Okay? The Hans. So I'd like to ask a question. You mentioned the need for preventing marine plastic waste at its source. So do you have an example of a successful value chain collaboration bridging private and the public entities, which has resulted in capturing end-of-life fishing gear before it ends up at waste in the environment or landfill? Do you give us a good example?
Thank you very much for that question. And as a matter of fact, I have. And it is quite important to actually share these experiences that we have. Obviously, a circular economy must be built upon a solid, you can say, and viable business case, finding and making the necessary links in the value chain. It is essential. However, this can also be quite challenging, especially if solutions to certain challenges are beyond a country's own border. And as you rightly say, Inger, this is transboundary challenges that we are facing. A recent case, however, which exemplifies successfully building up a solid business value chain from the ground up, is presented in our collaboration actually with WWF Denmark and local government to set up a system to collect and source Greenland's used and discarded fishing gear for recycling at our factory in Denmark. With no viable solution for sustainable recycling of these complex waste fractions in Greenland itself, these materials presented an unused resource with the potential of many more lives in new products. And thanks to quite an effort done by WWF in Greenland, piloting this idea and bridging the gap between public and private cooperation across country borders, Greenland is now able to ensure that used and discarded maritime gear is given another life. We're very proud of the result. We're very proud of the collaboration, and we now have a route to pursue, going forward together with this setup. So thank you for the efforts done by the WWF and the government of Greenland for participating and willingness to put some actions between SDG 17 partnerships for the goals.
Yeah, it sounds very good in a partnership. I'd like to go back to Inger. There are gaps among countries in capacity to manage the plastic waste and marine plastic litters. Recently, several measurements have been proposed to solve this problem in the international community. What are your suggestions for reducing the capacity gaps among countries?
Well, first of all, let me just mention one of those international amendments that have gone into force, the Basel Amendment, the Basel Convention Plastic Amendment. That went into force on January 1, because let's understand, much of the goods that are produced in Asia are imported to Western Europe and North America, and what comes back, imported back to many countries in Africa as well as into Asia, is plastic waste. The amendment that went into force on January 1 is that you cannot export certain types of plastics and polymers, etc. But in general, it prevents countries from exporting their garbage to other countries. And that is a step that has taught some countries that actually it's a rude awakening, because they need to understand actually they need to deal with it at home and can't just sort of cast it away in another shore. So that gap is one that I want to just be mindful of. There are these rules that have gone into effect, and we of course urge all countries that have not ratified Basel to do so. Now, in terms of and then the second point, I sit right now in Nairobi, Kenya, where we are proud to be headquarters as the United Nations Environment Programme. Rwanda and Kenya and some nearly 35 other countries, I believe, have actually introduced a ban on single-use plastics years ago. When you land in Nairobi, you're told in the airplane that you could be fined up to $1,000 if you have a plastic bag on you. Now, good on these countries. They've understood that they don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. They don't have the investors that are willing to invest in recycling. So therefore, the only choice they have is is reduction. That doesn't mean we don't have plastic waste, because packaging still comes with plastic, etc. But they've just banned bread bags, for example, and now we run back to old style wax paper. So it can be done. Now, about beyond that and being mindful of time, just to say that clearly capacity building, clearly investments, clearly working on redesign, clearly working on technical assistance, clearly working on awareness and education, although I would say here in Kenya, people are more aware about packaging than anywhere else I know because of the legislation that is in place. But also sharing data and information. We heard from the introductory statement from the NOAA acting director, speaking to the US now wishing to map their own plastic and where it all goes and have a better assessment. That's good. We need to have a better understanding. But let's be honest, as Marco has said, we need some global dimensions of understanding what are the rules of the game here. And industry needs to be at the table, of course, consumers, and very much governments, as well as, of course, civil society. So we very much hope that at the United Nations Environment Conference that is coming up, the United Nations Environment Assembly coming up in February of next year, that we can find governments coming together to strike some of these agreements. Let me stop here because I'd like to hear from my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. So I go back to Michael. So to fill the gap between countries, the technical and financial support must be supported above all. The marine litter-related official development assistance, so-called ODA projects, are still very limited. So it seems necessary for developed countries to increase ODA support for these areas, or to expand or create new financial resources. So what do you think about this issue?
Well, I think clearly the resources to address this issue are required to be shared. This has been as Madame Anderson has just pointed out, this has been a situation that has in some ways been imposed on developing countries, and even in the case of Canada, there's been several incidents where waste has been exported to countries in Asia, Philippines and Cambodia. And quite frankly, this reflects a lack of planning back home in Canada. And interestingly, these have turned into diplomatic issues as well. So to provide solutions to developing countries is in some ways to prevent the development of diplomatic issues and resentment against the countries where some of the plastics originate from. So in the case of Canada, besides our commitment to spearheading the Oceans Plastic Charter, as I mentioned, which started at our chair of the G7 in 2019, there's been another number of initiatives that we've embarked upon. I've mentioned already about how we've used funds to assist developing countries to develop their sustainable ocean plans. Canada has been a significant contributor to the World Bank's Pro-Blue Fund, which provides financial resources directly to projects in developing countries where they are aligned to the objectives of the Oceans Charter. We've also provided significant funding through a national fund on the Ghost. It's called the Ghost Gear Fund, and it's aligned with the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, which as Mr. Kirstensen mentioned in his example with Greenland, it's designed to recycle fishing gear. And in the case of this particular fund, it's funded, I believe, 30 projects, several of which have been outside of Canada. So these are just a few examples of how our country is approached. I'm sure other donor countries can come up with similar examples, but to shortly answer your question, absolutely, ODA has to play a key role in this issue.
Yes, yeah, we only covered just the two topics, but we are running over time. So better to move to the third topic quickly. We will now discuss post-plastic society and microplastics. The first question goes to Hans. So one of the big issues in the international community is carbon neutrality. The carbon neutrality is also related to plastics produced by petroleum or natural gas. Some countries have announced strides to reduce the usage of plastic products. So what ways can you suggest to reduce the production and use of plastics?
Thank you very much for that question. And I definitely agree that it is vital to reduce the production and use of plastic wherever sensible. However, we must act accountably and evidence-based when deciding to reduce the use of plastics. Plastics, as has been said earlier, in fact, a wondrous and a circular material which can be used again and again, and has also contributed to and will contribute to significant CO2 savings. For example, and has done that in the logistics sector by extending the shelf life of food, and I could continue with examples. We have, however, to make sure not to transfer the environmental burden to a different sector or even another country when reducing our plastic consumption. Rather, I would propose the question, how do we reduce the production and use of environmentally and CO2 heavy virgin plastics? I even, feel like calling it black plastics. The simple answer, by integrating recycled green plastics wherever possible. And I have to say that the numerous product portfolio that we, together with brand owners and converters, have developed demonstrates that it is, in fact, possible. So I very much agree with Marco and Inger when they're saying we don't have to wait for legislative interventions or frameworks. We have to get started. It is not enough to just bring forward pledges and intentions. It is time to act. So what are we waiting for? Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. So I'd like a question to Dr. Sang Hong. The problem of microplastic brought in a paradigm shift in marine litter pollution. The general public worry about their impact on marine ecosystem as well as human health. So, however, it seems there are still big knowledge gaps. So what are major current scientific issues need to be addressed? We are running out of time, so would you make it short?
Okay. The microplastic now becomes a global environmental issue. So although various studies has been attempted for last decade, the overall scientific information is still very limited. Among the various issues, the issue that many people most wanted to know is whether the current pollution level can pose a risk to marine ecosystem and human health. To address this question, risk assessment has been attempted in Europe and South Korea based on available toxicological and environmental exposure data. This study tentatively concluded that current pollution level would not pose a threat to the marine ecosystem. But microplastic pollution will have an adverse ecological impact in the future because of rapidly increasing trend of microplastic concentration in the environment. And also, that's why the precautionary action is necessary from now to prevent further increase of microplastic concentration in the environment. However, there is a high uncertainty in this result because risk was assessed based on the very limited toxicological information. Therefore, toxicological information covering wide range of the marine species and also various types of microplastic should be acquired. And second issue can be nanoplastic. Currently, we have very limited knowledge of nanoplastics. Recent laboratory experiments showed us that the nano-sized particles can be produced from the surface of the large plastics by UV radiation. But their environmental existence and existing forms should be confirmed. And also, we also needed the knowledge of the environmental fate of microplastic and nanoplastics, including fragmentation mechanism and the fragmentation rate and quantity, source, input pathway, transportation, bioaccumulation, traffic transportation, and so on, for their proper management.
Okay, thank you, Sang-hee. So it'll be the last question to the panelist, the Marco. To replace plastics, the alternatives, including biodegradable materials, are being forced to use some countries. So on the other hand, there are some concerns that regulations on the production of or use of plastic could affect on related industries. So what are the ways to find a mutually acceptable solution, and what are the solutions to enhance industry engagement?
Thank you. I think this is a really key question because what we're really discussing here about plastic and plastic pollution is effectively a system transition, a transition from a linear to a circular system, a transition from an unsustainable to a sustainable system, both socially, environmentally, and actually economically too. So we know that focusing on defining the problem, it's relatively simple. Focusing on the solutions is a little bit more complicated, but still, the transition is really the difficult part of the whole process. And the reason is that every transition creates risks of instability, risks of winners and losers, risks of unmanaged trade-offs, and the risk of unintended consequences, creating other problems, environmental, social, of various nature. And particularly when sometimes the temptation is to implement simplistic solutions to actually complex issues. So that's where we need to focus on. We really need to really ensure and focus on a key element of an inclusive, a just, but also at the same time effective transition. One key element of this is really stakeholders' engagement. The most effective transitions are the ones where all the players involved in the system change are having a voice, are listened to, and they are part of co-creating the solution and the plan. The second key element it's to accompany these various players, particularly the one most affected and needed for a deeper transition, accompanied with a number of measures. It could be regulation, it could be incentives, it could be retraining programs. It depends on the stakeholder, on the player, on the situation. But again, like we said earlier, all these risks associated to a transition that needs to be addressed and taken into account are not a good reason for not embracing the transition itself. So we have to go into this process with open eyes and listening mode, inclusive approach, but still, back to my earlier point, with a clear goal and direction in mind. It's not very different, frankly, to the other transitions we are embracing right now. The one from fossil fuel to renewable energy, the one from chemical agriculture to natural agriculture, and so on and so forth. So we are living an age of transition, a transition that hopefully will bring us and lead us to a carbon neutral, nature positive, equitable, and safer future for all of us. So we need to focus on that particular process of transitioning from where we are today, and we know is not sustainable, to where we want to be tomorrow in a more sustainable way.
Thank you, Marco. So actually, we are planning to have Q&A session and pick up some questions from the chat box, but so we are running over time because of the organizers are very ambitious to cover this topic such a short time, and all the panelists are very eager to say something. So unfortunately, I have to summarize this panel discussion. So sorry. So the marine plastic waste must be addressed from the perspective of a whole life cycle, from production to disposal. Of course, disposal must be minimized down to zero waste by changing the current largely linear plastic value chain to real circular value chain and economy. And secondly, the efforts by each country, as the example given by Canada, and international coordination and cooperation as well as essential to tackle the marine plastic pollution. The establishment of both national legislation and international convention needs to be considered, especially need to find and implement an easily and practically applicable field first. And the provision of a sound scientific information is very crucial to persuade many stakeholders and to draw consensus among them. Thirdly, communication and cooperation with the private sector, such as the civil society and the corporation, and their active participation are very, very crucial to solve the plastic waste issues. In addition, the marine plastic pollution is a transboundary, or we call a planetary boundary pollution. So it should be strengthened to fill the financial, resource, and technology gaps among countries through enhancing currently available various international programs. Finally, the microplastics shifted a paradigm of plastic pollution. So it can cause adverse effects on human health as well as the marine ecosystem, and would be a irreversible problem. Thus, the precautionary approach is highly required to reduce plastic pollution and to upgrade the scientific knowledge for future generation. Okay, it's time to wrap up the panel discussion. I'd like to thank the panelists for sharing your expert insight with great passion on such important topics, and also audience attended till the end of this session on site and online. The COVID-19 pandemic may have disrupted the global community, but I sincerely hope that the ideas and efforts from today's discussion to be realized and bring about a positive impact on our future. Thank you all very much again.
Thank you very much, panelists and moderator, for your expertise and invaluable contribution to the session. Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at the end of the ocean session with a theme of building back bluer through oceans. Whenever a crisis comes, humankind has always responded wisely and translating the crisis into a new opportunity and innovation. It is time for us, humanities, once again join our hands together as an international solidarity, open up a creative path for development to respond and overcome the crisis caused by climate change. Thank you to global citizens around the world for watching our session for a long time. My sincere thanks must go to our presenters, moderators, and panelists, both home and abroad, for your presence and passion. In 2021 P4G Seoul Summit, we look forward to your support and interest till the very last day, 31st of May. I'm afraid this is the end of the ocean session. Now the session is officially closed. Thank you.